You won't believe these bizarre celebrity deaths are real. From electrocution in bathtubs to choking on cocktails, falling off ladders, or being crushed by satellite dishes, these stars once lit up the worlds of film, music, and sports, only to meet their end in the most shocking and tragic ways imaginable. The truth is wilder than fiction. Before we dive into the details of our investigation, make sure to subscribe to the channel and give it a like. It really helps the channel grow. 1. Charles McGraw. The embodiment of rugged masculinity, this gravel-voiced tough guy carved his name into film noir history with roles in The Narrow Margin, Spartacus, and dozens of gritty 1950s crime dramas. On screen, he survived shootouts, gang wars, and Roman arenas. But in real life, it wasn't bullets or blades that brought him down. It was a slip on a bathroom floor. On July 29, 1980, at his Studio City home, McGraw took what should have been a routine shower. He slipped and crashed through a glass shower door, the jagged shards slashing into his arm and severing his brachial artery. Alone and bleeding heavily, McGraw collapsed, unable to call for help. By the time anyone found him, the noir legend was gone, claimed by blood loss and a freak household accident. 2. Victor Sen-Yung, a familiar face to millions as the soft-spoken cook Hop Sing on Bonanza and the sharp-witted Jimmy Chan in the Charlie Chan detective films. This Hollywood trailblazer for Asian American actors brought warmth and dignity to roles in an industry that often didn't know what to do with his talent. But in 1980, Victor's final scene played out in the most chilling way imaginable. Inside his quiet North Hollywood home, Victor had turned his passion to pottery, curing ceramics in an oven for his small mail-order business. An undetected gas leak filled the house. He never stood a chance. Days passed before anyone realized he was missing, and when they did, they found him lifeless, poisoned by the very air he breathed. 3. Jack Cassidy. The epitome of charm and old-school Hollywood charisma, this Tony Award-winning Broadway star was a dashing television presence and father of teen heartthrobs David and Sean Cassidy. But behind the glitz and glamour was a man battling demons. In the early hours of December 12, 1976, Cassidy fell asleep on his Naugahyde couch with a lit cigarette in hand. Moments later, flames consumed the room. By the time firefighters arrived, it was too late. The blaze had reduced his body to ashes, so much so that authorities had to identify him through dental records. One of Hollywood's golden voices was silenced forever in a horrifying inferno of his own making. 4. Joe Spinell. Hollywood's favorite villain, a gruff, unforgettable presence in classics like The Godfather, Rocky, and Taxi Driver. He was the guy you loved to hate, the heavy with a 1,000-yard stare and a voice soaked in grit. But on January 13, 1989, Spinell's life ended not with a bang, but with a horrifying whisper of glass and blood. That morning, Spinell was alone in his modest New York apartment when he slipped in his shower and crashed into the glass door. The impact shattered the glass, slicing deep into his skin. Instead of calling for help, he staggered to his couch. Hours later, he was found dead, having bled out alone in the shadows of his living room. 5. Glenn Shaddix. The unforgettable Otho from Beetlejuice, flamboyant, sarcastic, and scene-stealing in every frame. With his booming voice and eccentric charm, he became a cult icon, beloved for his quirky roles and offbeat energy. But on September 7, 2010, in his Alabama condo, Glenn suffered a tragic fall in his kitchen. One misstep, one wrong angle, and his head slammed violently into the sink. The blunt trauma was fatal. Just like that, the voice behind the mayor of Halloween Town in The Nightmare Before Christmas was silenced forever. 6. Ola Brunkert. The beat behind ABBA's biggest hits, the drummer who powered Dancing Queen, Mamma Mia, and Waterloo with impeccable rhythm and quiet precision. While the world swooned over the Swedish supergroups Harmonies and Sparkle, Brunkert stayed in the shadows, keeping time and history in motion. But in 2008, in a shocking twist of fate, he died in his own home, brought down by a glass door. Living quietly in Mallorca, Spain, Brunkert suffered a freak accident while walking through his home. He tripped and fell, smashing his neck against a glass door. The impact shattered the pane and severed a major artery. Bleeding heavily, Brunkert somehow managed to wrap a towel around his neck and stumble outside in a desperate search for help, but collapsed and died in his garden before anyone could save him. 7. Steve Peregrine Took. Rock's wild child, the eccentric, untamed half of the original Tyrannosaurus Rex duo alongside Mark Bolan. With his theatrical flair, rebel spirit, and taste for chaos, Took was destined to either change the music world or burn out trying. But no one could have predicted the freak accident that would end his life. On October 27, 1980, at age 31, Steve Took was found dead in his London apartment. The cause, asphyxiation after choking on a cocktail cherry. A man who lived through the psychedelic 60s, played with the gods of glam rock, and dabbled in every excess imaginable, met his end not from drugs or violence, but from a single deadly piece of fruit. 8. Buddy Clark. The golden voice of the big band era, smooth, romantic, and effortlessly charming. With hits like Linda and How Are Things in Glamour, he crooned his way into the hearts of millions during the 1940s, becoming one of America's most beloved vocalists. But on October 1st, 1949, just hours after a triumphant radio performance, Clark's life came crashing down literally. That evening, riding high from a CBS broadcast alongside the Andrews sisters, Clark joined 5 friends aboard a small private plane bound for Los Angeles after a day at the Stanford football game. Somewhere over Beverly Boulevard, the plane ran out of fuel. The engine sputtered, altitude dropped. The aircraft slammed into the streets of West LA, killing Buddy Clark instantly at just 37 years old. 9. Bob Saget, America's Dad, the warm-hearted Danny Tanner from Full House, the goofy host of America's Funniest Home Videos, and the unexpectedly raunchy stand-up comic whose humor was as bold as it was beloved. But on January 9, 2022, the man who made millions laugh was found lifeless in a Florida hotel room. After performing a stand-up set the night before, Saget returned to his Ritz-Carlton suite near Orlando. The next morning, he was discovered unresponsive in bed. An autopsy revealed he'd suffered a fatal blow to the back of his head, likely from accidentally hitting it on the hotel's nightstand. With no idea of the severity, Saget apparently went to sleep and never woke up. 10. Barbara Weldons. On the brink of stardom, this French singer-songwriter had a haunting voice, poetic soul, and the kind of electric stage presence that made audiences fall in love. Her debut album had just dropped, and critics hailed her as a rising star in European music. But on July 19, 2017, her electrifying performance turned fatal literally. While performing barefoot at the Léo Ferré Festival in Gordon, France, Weldon collapsed mid-song on stage. At first, some thought it was part of the act, but she had been electrocuted in front of a stunned audience. Investigators revealed that faulty electrical equipment had delivered a deadly jolt to her exposed foot. The young singer died almost instantly of cardiac arrest. She was just 35. 11. Claude François. Known to millions as Clo-Clo, he lit up stages with dazzling energy, catchy hits, and charisma that drove fans into a frenzy. He sold over 35 million records, co-wrote the original version of My Way, and was one of France's most beloved cultural icons. But on March 11, 1978, that light was snuffed out by a crooked light fixture. After filming a BBC special, François returned to his Paris apartment for a relaxing bath. But perfectionist as ever, he noticed a wall light hanging slightly off-center above the tub. He stood up in the water, reached out to fix it, and was electrocuted instantly. The current shot through his wet body, and the star who had electrified a generation was gone in a flash. 12. Keith Relf. The raw, soulful voice behind the Yardbirds, a legendary band that helped launch the careers of guitar gods like Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, and Jimmy Page. With hits like For Your Love and Heart Full of Soul, Relf wasn't just the frontman, he was the dark, brooding spirit of British blues rock. But his final note came from a deadly jolt in his own basement. On May 12, 1976, Relf was at home playing guitar, but the instrument wasn't grounded. As he stood barefoot on a metal gas pipe, electricity surged through his body. It was instant and brutal. The voice that once captivated crowds was silenced in a flicker of voltage. He was just 33. 13. Butterfly McQueen, unforgettable as the high-pitched, wide-eyed Prissy from Gone with the Wind, a role that etched her into cinematic history. But McQueen was far more than just a maid on screen. She was a fierce intellect, an outspoken atheist, and a woman who rejected the roles Hollywood tried to trap her in. On December 22, 1995, at age 84, McQueen was at home in Augusta, Georgia, when she tried lighting a kerosene lamp. The lamp malfunctioned, burst into flames, and within seconds, her clothes caught fire. Alone and engulfed in flames, McQueen suffered massive burns. She was rushed to the hospital but died from her injuries. 14. Terry Kath. Not just the soul of the band Chicago, he was a guitar god in his own right. Jimi Hendrix once called him better than himself. With his gritty vocals and explosive solos, Kath gave the band its rock edge. But off stage, he had another obsession: guns. On January 23, 1978, that obsession turned deadly. At a party in Los Angeles, Kath began showing off his gun collection. He picked up a .38 revolver, spun it, pointed it at his head, and pulled the trigger. Click. Empty. Then he grabbed a semi-automatic pistol and laughed, saying, "Don't worry, look, the clip's not even in it." Seconds later, he pulled the trigger again. This time it fired. One bullet. Instant death. 15. Danny Cedrone. He helped ignite the rock and roll revolution as the guitarist behind the blistering solo on Bill Haley's Rock Around the Clock, laying down one of the most iconic riffs in music history. But just days after recording that legendary track, with fame about to knock on his door, Danny took one wrong step. On June 17, 1954, just 3 days before his 34th birthday, Cedrone suffered a freak accident. He tripped while walking down a staircase and broke his neck. Rock Around the Clock would go on to sell millions and define a generation, but its lead guitarist never got to take a bow. 16. Martha Mansfield. A rising star of the silent film era, elegant, radiant, and destined for greatness. Known for her beauty and dramatic presence, she had just finished filming the Civil War epic, The Warrens of Virginia, when tragedy struck. On November 29, 1923, Mansfield had just wrapped her scenes in San Antonio, Texas. Still dressed in her elaborate costume, a hoop-skirted flammable gown of the 1860s, she stepped outside to rest. Someone nearby struck a match. In a split second, a stray spark landed on her dress, and the entire outfit went up in flames. Screaming and engulfed, Martha was rushed to the hospital with severe burns over most of her body. She died the next day, just 24 years old. 17. Gregory Plitt. A real-life action hero, fitness model, motivational machine, and former Army Ranger turned TV star with a chiseled body, unstoppable energy, and larger-than-life persona. He inspired millions to push harder, live better, and chase greatness. But on January the 17th, 2015, that fearless drive led to a tragic end. Plitt was filming an energy drink commercial on active train tracks in Burbank, California, trying to capture that perfect adrenaline-pumping shot. He believed he could outrun the locomotive for dramatic effect. Cameras rolled, the train approached, but timing misfired. Plitt was struck and killed instantly at just 37 years old. 18. Gaspard Ulliel, the face of French cinema's next generation, hauntingly handsome, brooding, and magnetic on screen. From Hannibal Rising to Saint Laurent, he brought depth and elegance to every role. With a César Award under his belt in Hollywood Calling, Ulliel was on the verge of global stardom. But on January 19, 2022, a carefree day on the slopes turned into a nightmare. While skiing at the La Rosière Resort in the French Alps, Ulliel collided with another skier at a trail intersection. He wasn't wearing a helmet. The impact sent him crashing to the ground, suffering severe brain trauma. Though the other skier walked away unharmed, Ulliel never regained consciousness. He died at just 37. 19. John Denver. The voice of the mountains, a folk pop icon who gave the world timeless anthems like Take Me Home, Country Roads, Annie's Song, and Rocky Mountain High. With his golden voice and gentle soul, he embodied peace, nature, and Americana. But on October 12, 1997, Denver's love for flying ended in catastrophe. Flying his experimental Rutan Long-Eased aircraft over Monterey Bay, Denver was practicing touch-and-go landings. Low on fuel in one tank, he attempted to switch to another, a maneuver that required him to twist his body 90 degrees mid-flight to reach an awkwardly placed valve behind the seat. In doing so, he likely pressed against the right rudder, sending the plane into an uncontrollable yaw and pitch. Moments later, the plane nosedived into the bay. Denver died instantly on impact. 20. Bo Diaz, a powerhouse behind the plate, a two-time MLB All-Star, fan favorite, and one of the few Venezuelan catchers to leave a lasting legacy in Major League Baseball. With his commanding presence and defensive prowess, Diaz was a key part of the Cleveland Indians and later helped lead the Philadelphia Phillies to the 1983 National League pennant. But on November 23, 1990, the man who once stared down 90 fastballs met a fate no one could have imagined. At just 37 years old, Diaz was at home in Caracas, Venezuela, adjusting a satellite dish on the roof of his house. In a freak twist, the massive metal structure came loose and came crashing down, landing directly on him, crushing his neck and head. 21st, Payne Stewart, golf showman, the man in the knickers and tam o'shanter hat, swinging with flair and winning with grace. With 3 major championships under his belt and a U.S. Open victory just months earlier, he was at the peak of his career. But on October 25, 1999, Stewart boarded a private jet and never set foot on Earth again. Shortly after takeoff from Orlando, the Learjet carrying Stewart and 5 others lost cabin pressure. Everyone on board was incapacitated by hypoxia. The plane kept flying on autopilot for 4 ghostly hours, crossing several states as fighter jets scrambled to intercept it, only to find fogged windows and no response. Then, somewhere over South Dakota, the jet ran out of fuel and plunged into a field. All aboard died. 22nd, Halyna Hutchins, a rising star behind the camera, a gifted cinematographer with a sharp eye, bold vision, and passion for telling stories through light and lens. But on October 21st, 2021, her name was forever etched into Hollywood history for the tragic way she died, shot by a prop gun on a movie set. While working as director of photography on the Western film Rust in New Mexico, Hutchins was setting up a scene inside a small church. Actor Alec Baldwin, rehearsing with what was believed to be a cold prop revolver, aimed the gun and pulled the trigger. A loud crack, then chaos. A live round had somehow made its way into the chamber. The bullet struck Hutchins in the chest. She collapsed as crew members scrambled to help. She died en route to the hospital at just 42. 23. Brandon Lee, the son of martial arts legend. Bruce Lee seemed destined to follow in his father's footsteps. With his striking looks, natural charisma, and impressive fighting skills, Brandon was carving out his own path in action cinema. His breakout role in The Crow was meant to launch him to superstardom. But on March 31st, 1993, during filming in Wilmington, North Carolina, tragedy struck in a horrifyingly familiar way. In a scene where his character was to be shot, a prop gun that was supposed to fire blanks contained a real bullet fragment from a previous scene. When actor Michael Massey pulled the trigger, the projectile struck Brandon in the abdomen. He was rushed to the hospital but died during surgery at just 28 years old. The Lee family curse, as some called it, had claimed another life. Like his father before him, Brandon died just as his star was ascending, leaving behind a haunting final performance and questions about the dangers lurking on movie sets. 24. Vic Morrow, a veteran actor known for his intense performances in combat and countless films, Morrow was a tough guy performer who brought gravitas to every role. But on July 23, 1982, while filming a Vietnam War scene for Twilight Zone the movie in California, his career came to a horrific end in one of Hollywood's most shocking accidents. The scene called for a helicopter to hover low, while Morrow's character carried 2 child actors to safety. But the pyrotechnic explosions were too close and too powerful. The blast damaged the helicopter's tail rotor, sending the aircraft spinning out of control. The main rotor blade decapitated Morrow instantly and killed both child actors, Micah Dinley and Renee Shinyichin. The tragedy wasn't just a freak accident, it exposed the dangerous corners that production sometimes cut. The children were working illegally at night, safety protocols were ignored, and the director pushed for a more dramatic shot despite the risks. Morrow, who had survived World War II and decades in Hollywood's toughest roles, died at 53 in a preventable disaster that changed film industry safety forever. These tragic endings serve as haunting reminders that even the brightest stars can be extinguished by the most unexpected and bizarre twists of fate. Fame offers no protection from life's cruelest ironies.